Pleasure of working with Senator Westerfield on some bills, and you have a great senator. So please welcome Senator Whitney Westerfield.
It's 3 in a row. I'm also unopposed tomorrow, but we must be doing a fine job. One guy thinks so. You all, thanks for coming out. Thanks for coming out to support Senator Paul. I certainly stand with Rand. And I want to say something. I've never heard this before. Surely she's not the first to come up with this. But this morning, Allison Ball, our state treasurer, sent out a tweet from one of your earlier stops today on your tour. And she said tomorrow she hopes to see a Rand slide. And I thought that was, and it's been favorited and retweeted 100 times. I thought that was the best thing I've ever heard. And I'm looking forward to seeing that. But I have the distinct honor of introducing his better half. And there's a couple of things I like about Kelly Paul. Certainly she's a wonderful supporter and partner for her husband, a mother, and a great ambassador for all of us in Kentucky. But I think the best part is that she's a former constituent, back from I don't know how long it's been since you were living in Russell.
Just a year or two.
So she is a former constituent. I'll take it. Glad to have Kelly Paul here with us today.
Now we just have how many more hours to go? This is our 7th of 8 stops today on our fly around. So we are home stretch. We'll be in Bowling Green next, and it's been an amazing day. And I do have to say that for us, even though this is kind of a grueling time, when I look out and I see people's energy and their support and their friendship, and people tell us that they are praying for us, it really does mean a lot. So I just want to thank you all for that, and thank you all for showing up to make us excited and feeling good as we go into the home stretch. I know if you're here tonight that you, like me, are incredibly proud of the job that Rand has done as our U.S. Senator. The last 6 years in the U.S. Senate, he has taken many stands, always to defend the taxpayer, to defend the working person, for small government rather than large government, for the Constitution, for liberty, whether he's in Eastern Kentucky talking about enterprise zones or he's in Western Louisville talking about criminal justice. He is always standing for us, and he has been a tireless worker. I think it's really evidence of the fact that he walks the walk and he believes what he says. When you look at his U.S. Senate budget, which is the only budget that he has 100% control over, and that's his U.S. Senate budget, his staff in Washington. And after 6 years of being one of the hardest working members of the U.S. Senate, he has returned nearly $3 million to the U.S. Treasury. Being a good steward of the taxpayer dollar, and that is what he believes, and I'm just so proud of him. He truly is a person that has a lot of energy, gives so much of his time and himself. I know many of you know that he is an eye surgeon, and even after he became our U.S. Senator, he continues to do eye surgery pro bono for needy people across our state and even around the world. He's been on medical mission trips to Haiti and Guatemala in the last few years, continuing work that he started over a decade ago. So it really speaks to his heart and the person that he is. We have been married for 26 years. Just celebrated our anniversary a couple weeks ago, and I am so proud of him, and I know you are too. So here, let's welcome my husband, Rand Paul.
Thank you. We are poised to make Kentucky a conservative state for the next generation if Hopkinsville and Christian County will do their part on Tuesday. You going to help us? It used to be said Christian County was, the Gibraltar of the West, the Democratic bastion, and you were all Democrats, they said once upon a time. Now you have these 3 Republicans running unopposed. I don't think you necessarily changed. I just think the Democrat Party left us.
Exactly. Yeah.
Kelly's parents were always Democrats over in Russellville, and I told them I was running for office, and I said, I'm going to need your vote. And they said, oh, we'll vote for you in the fall. I said, I got to win a primary to get to the fall. And I said, well, by the way, when's the last time you voted for a Democrat for president? And my mother-in-law said, well, it was Kennedy. I said, well, that has been a while. Things have changed. Kennedy actually was for lower taxes. Anybody met a Democrat for lower taxes? Our vision for the country and for the state is different. We want smaller constitutional government. We want budgets that balance. We want lower taxes. We think we're taxed enough already. And we want less regulations. You know, they're killing us with regulations. Kentucky's lost 15,000 jobs from the war on coal regulations. And you may say, well, I don't mine coal, but I have a farm. What's that have to do with me? When they're done with the coal mines, they're coming after the farms. You think they won't do it? They're already here. The waters of the U.S. regulation has now put 95% of Kentucky's farmland under federal control. Try going out and working on a cattle pond. Try going out and doing anything to the contour of your land. Try putting tile on your land and see what the government says about it. I'm not talking about your local government. I'm talking about the federal government. The other day I saw an EPA report that says when you plow the land and you have the furrow, the little mound in between the rows, EPA is calling this a mini mountain range. I'm not making this up because they say we have the power under existing statute to regulate mountain ranges. These people will not be done until they've gotten their hands into every nook and cranny of our business. We have to stand up, and the only time to stand up is at the election. And some of you may have heard about the FBI, the email scandal. I'm a little confused about it. James Comey has this big press conference and says, well, yes, she took the email home. Yes, she put it on a server. These were all things she wasn't allowed to do. Yes, her national security was threatened. And yes, she was extremely careless, but we can't indict her. And, you know, the question I have, what if it was a soldier at Fort Campbell? What if it were a private or a sergeant or a general? All of them have been prosecuted. It can be an accident. Our soldiers know this. If you take home something by accident, it's not the intent to sell it to the Russians. It's the accident that it might be exposed to people. And we're going to possibly put somebody in the White House who was so careless with regard to our national security that she took this home. I read today she had her maid reading the emails. Her maid had access to top secret emails. Boy, that's comforting, isn't it? So then Comey says, we're not indicting her. She's cleared. Then he comes back a week later and says, oh, we found on Anthony Weiner's computer. We're not going to go there. There's been enough late night videos. We found on his computer 650,000 of her emails. So we're going to open the investigation. And so everybody thinks, oh, my goodness, now she may be indicted again. And then they come back a few days and say, oh, well, they may have been classified. They may have been accurate, but we stick with the same conclusion, which I guess is just doesn't matter. If you're a Clinton, the law doesn't apply to you. But I'll tell you, of all the votes I've cast over the last 6 years, one of the votes that I'm most proud of, I was the only senator to vote against confirming James Comey. I think he's been a disaster. One of the most important votes I will take if I'm reelected is over who should be on the Supreme Court. And I can tell you, as I stand before you, I can tell you with certainty that I'm not voting for any justice that will not uphold the Constitution. When you look at this and you say, thank you. When you look at this and you say, what's one of the most important problems that we face in the country? It's that our government is acting in an illegal and unconstitutional way. See, the laws are supposed to be written by Congress, not by the president. This is a big deal. The whole thing, we have crippled an entire industry, the coal industry, and there's not been one vote in Congress. Not one of those rules that President Obama has written under his executive order or regulatory privilege, not one of those rules would pass in Congress. So we're letting him get away with something that's illegal and unconstitutional. Who could stop him? The American people could in the election. We could say we don't want Hillary Clinton, who also told us she was going to put more coal miners out of business. We could stop them in the election, or we can stop them with the Supreme Court. And they're kind of tied together, because the next president's going to appoint at least one, but maybe two or three. The young people in this room may live their entire life under justices that will be appointed by the next president. And it's a big debate. Who gets to write the laws? I had a debate with my opponent the other day. What's his name? But anyway, we had a debate. In the middle of the debate, he thought it would be great theater and great politics to criticize me because I like to talk about the Founding Fathers. And I like to talk about the philosophers that influenced them. And one of them was Montesquieu. And he's like, who cares? This is arcane, and this is some French guy, right? But here's what I say. What Montesquieu, the idea that he gave to our Founding Fathers was checks and balances, separation of power, and that the legislature should write the laws, not the president. It was part of what our Founding Fathers looked towards when they said, you know what? We don't want too much power to accumulate in the hands of one person. We didn't want a king. When Ben Franklin walks out of the Constitutional Convention, a woman asks him, will it be a monarchy? Will it be democracy or a republic? He says it'll be a constitutional republic if you can keep it. That means that the powers would be limited that we gave to the president. This is incredibly important. This isn't some old history lesson. Montesquieu said this. He said when the executive, when the president begins to legislate, a form of tyranny will ensue. He's as right 200 and some odd years ago as it is today. In fact, when I want to criticize the president, which I do on occasion, I say he's acting like a king, because that should be an insult. We didn't want a king. We still don't want a king. We don't want too much power to accumulate in the hands of any one person. I don't care whether a Republican or a Democrat. We're here not too far from Fort Campbell. We had a rally the other day and we announced 200 veterans supporting me. My chief foreign policy advisor is a 27-year veteran of the Air Force and a former retired brigadier general. And when I talked to these guys, and I was with the room of them the other day, we talked about the responsibility of a legislator to vote on when we go to war. And how, to me, it's the most important thing I ever vote on. The budget's important, spending's important, but if I'm going to send one of your kids to war, there's nothing more important than that. And it should never be taken lightly. But it also goes back to Montesquieu. It goes back to the Founding Fathers who said that power shouldn't reside in the hands of one person. So what do I fear about Hillary Clinton as much or more than anything? She'll take us to war without letting your Congress vote on it, and then she'll drip, 10 soldiers at a time to war. Who goes to war and sends 10 people to war? They trained 250 moderates in Syria, trained 60 moderates, cost them $250 million, $4 million a fighter. She sent 10, her and her buddy Barack, sent 10 of them to war. Who sends 10 people to war? We decide as a people when we go to war. We come together, Republican and Democrat. We don't send our soldiers overseas with one arm behind their back calling 3 different attorneys to decide how we fight the enemy. But for too long, we've been lackadaisical about this. We've let presidents take us to war in Libya. Now ISIS is stronger in Libya than they've ever been. They let us take us to war in Syria. Do you know that Syria has more Christians than any other country in the Middle East other than Egypt? Over 1 million Christians live in Syria. And if you ask them who they would rather have in charge, Assad or ISIS, they all say Assad. They don't love him. They know he's a dictator, but he's tolerated the Christians. Almost nobody on the side of the war that we've been supporting for years now none of them like us. None of them like Israel. We give weapons to people who say when they're done attacking Assad, they're going to attack Israel. This stuff is bizarre and absurd, but it's because we don't do one thing well. Pay attention to the Constitution. America is the richest, the freest, and the most humanitarian nation ever in the history of mankind. We give away more money individually, not the government. You individually, to your churches and charity, give away more money than most countries earn in a year. We give away more money than the gross domestic product of most countries, nearly $400 billion. That doesn't happen in Venezuela. It doesn't happen in Cuba. It doesn't happen in the old Soviet Union. It doesn't happen under socialism. Many of our leaders have said, that in order for liberty to survive, we need eternal vigilance. Every generation must renew its love of liberty. That's what we need. It's what elections are about. It's why instead of 50%, we need 60%. We need 70%. We need you to go home and tomorrow spend 10 minutes on the phone calling 15 or 20 friends and saying, don't forget to vote. Our future depends on it. If we turn out in a big way tomorrow, we're going to be one of the first states that's going to announce our presidential verdict as well as our Senate verdict tomorrow. It's probably going to be between the 7 or 8 o'clock hour. You want to send a message to the rest of the country that we're not happy about Hillary Clinton? Let's all get together and send them a message. Thank you very much.